sections, sorry. Listening, speaking together, and then reading and writing the other. Okay, well, he makes it very clear that that doesn't mean, no, that in no way means that you should predispose, no, to think that those skills are or should be assessed in isolation. Yeah, you must remember that when we studied the other book, okay, we saw that one of the characteristics that the assessment should have is that they are consistent, no? And so the more elements that you put, the better reflection of what the student really knows. And so a good assessment is one that takes into consideration everything that is seen in class, and that is listening, reading, writing, speaking, all of them. Right, okay. So although we see here listening and speaking together, it doesn't mean that they should be tested in isolation. As you can read in one of the passages here, first and first, yeah, here, no, it says, likewise, no, and maybe Abby, you can help me find this in this, I think it's third paragraph. Likewise, oh yeah, right here where you enhanced, yeah, your cursor is very, go up 2 or 3 lines, right in the middle, no? Yeah, so the text says, likewise, assessment is more authentic and provides more washback when skills are integrated, no? Integrated. Nevertheless, the skills are treated independently here, okay, in order to identify principal, test types, tasks, and issues associated with each one. So that's the first consideration. Always try to include assessments. I mean, or in your assessments, try to include all skills, no? Because that is one of the principles of assessment, no? The integration of skills. Right. A second, as you see there, is that vocabulary and grammar are usually seen also together, and it's not uncommon, you know, to find grammar tests and vocabulary tests in textbooks, no? Because these are also very useful instruments, no? And well, the main feature here is that responses, as you can see in this 7th line, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th line, responses for this type of quizzes are usually written, no? For example, multiple choice, selection, fill in the blanks, etc. No? And so what the author is clarifying here that he's going to cover all linguistic forms. No? Okay, and so finally on the next page, he says, no, that way, no, with all these considerations that he makes, no? I don't know where we are here, observing, I think it's over here, yeah. That way, no, they say, we don't perpetuate the myth that grammar and vocabulary and other linguistic forms can somehow be disassociated from mode of performance. No? So in other words, again, no, for an assessment to be complete and to be consistent, you need to include all forms of the language, no? And that includes performance, no? And so we have, for example, writing, and for example, speaking. And speaking, we've seen that it goes together with listening, no? And so, in other words, when you make an assessment of the language is not only grammar and vocabulary, no? It should have all these other components, listening and speaking as well. Mhm. Okay, in the next part, well, I'm sure that you have read, it's something that we already discussed. Something that I want to draw your attention here is what I said. Maybe I didn't say it as clearly as the author is saying here in his text, no? That when you propose to assess someone's ability in one or a combination of the four skills, you assess the person's competence, no? But you observe the person's performance, no? Now, sometimes performance doesn't indicate true competence. For example, a bad night's rest, an illness, an emotional distraction, anxiety, etc. Those are factors that could affect performance. Okay, and for this reason, okay, or as a consequence, providing an unreliable measure of actual competence. And so, as you know, what you have in the next line, in the next paragraph, where you see here beginning with, so one important principle. Yeah, one important principle of assessing is consider a learner's competence, no? Is to consider the possibility of fallibility, ¿no? Es decir, que la posibilidad de que pueda fallar, ¿no? The fallibility of the results of a single performance. So it's your obligation as a teacher, no, to triangulate your measurements, no? Consider at least 2 or more performances, okay? Before you draw your conclusions and you report the results and you get your records, no? So in other words, look, going back to the book Language Assessment, no? If you want to have consistent results, you have to take 2, 3 different, you have to administer 2, 3 or more assessments, no? So that you have a better, a real indication of the real progress that the student has made, or the ability, you know, that he really has. Because one test, you know, maybe the student was in his best day, you know, and a good student and a bad student got an A because he was lucky, you know, to choose the right answers. Okay, because the test was multiple choice. And a good student maybe was sick, no, didn't read the instructions because he was feeling kind of sleepy, and he failed, no? So you have to have more instances of similar assessments, no? So the more the better. Okay, and so as you can see here, you have one or more of the following designs, no? For example, several tests that are combined to form an assessment. That's also in the book, no? In the book, the Language Assessment for Classroom Teachers. Or you can have this other combination, a single test with multiple tasks to account for the performance variable, no? Performance variables. You can have in-class and extra-class graded work, and you can have alternative forms of assessment, no? Which we also saw in the first or second unit of this, of our syllabus, no? Alternative in assessments is the name, no? For example, portfolio, conferences, journal, observation, self-assessment, peer assessment, etc. So those are all options, no? Okay, to guarantee, especially to the student, that he is really being assessed in all the extension of the word, you know, in all the sense of the word. And the reason is because multiple measures will give you a more reliable and valid assessment than one single measurement, you know? Right. Okay. As you can see here, well, then it's something mentioned about something is mentioned about the second principle in assessment, that we must rely as much as possible on observable performance in our assessment. So what we observe is maybe more indicative, of what the student really knows, what his real ability is, performance. Now the problem here is with listening, because listening is not a skill that falls into this category of performance. Writing falls in the form of performance. Speaking falls into this category, but listening, not. Okay, so observable, as you can see here, observable means that it's being able to see or hear the performance of the learner. Okay, what is observable among the four skills of listening, speaking, reading, and writing? If you take listening, speaking, reading, and writing, which are observable? I ask you guys.
Writing and speaking.
Yeah. Writing and speaking. Yeah. And yeah, if you want to see this better, Abby, we can scroll down, go to page 118. For example, in listening, is the process observable? No, because what you can see is a student, for example. I mean, you can see a student maybe using the computer and playing the, por ejemplo, le podemos ver que pone play in the track, but that doesn't mean that that you actually see that the student is listening, or I mean understanding. So the process is not observable. The product is not observable because I mean, yeah, you ask the student, for example, to match ABC or choose ABC, but that doesn't mean that you really observe that. The only way that maybe you could observe that is that if you have the technology, if you had a machine to read the person's mind and see the inside of the brain and actually see that the student is making these connections, but we can't see that. In speaking, for example, the process is observable, yes. Can we scroll down up a little bit? Where the part is? Can we see the screen? Can we see this table 6.1? Can we scroll up a little bit?
Yes, Prof. I'm I don't know this.
You trying?
Yeah. Here,
exactly.
like this.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Now the product of speaking, the product, observable. Usually no, but you have this asterisk there, because the only way that you make it visible or you make it observable is if you record the student's presentation, the student's output. But usually we don't do this. First, because we can't do this unless you have the parents' authorization or and it's a big deal, it's a big hassle. So you can't record the students unless maybe you're making a video and you ask them to post a video somewhere, right? A video about, but it has to be something that is not personal, cooking something. Yeah, maybe in that case, the product is observable or visible. Reading, no? For example, you see a person holding a book. Yeah, you only see, what do you see? You see the person fixing their eyes on the paper, but that doesn't mean that you can really observe the process, no? The student can only be staring at the book and not really reading, and even worse, understanding. And the product is not also something that you can see. You ask the student a few questions, no? Fill in the blanks, matching or something. You see some lines in the paper, or you see some circles, but that doesn't mean that you see the product. And writing, no? Writing is observable, and the product is observable also because you can see, no? You can see that. Great. Okay, so well, so if we have analyzed this chart, we don't need to go back and read because the text is explaining what you see in the chart. No? The chart is very clear. No? Right. Yeah. Okay. So if you look at this page here, no, where you have where we see the table 6, no, table 6, yeah. Yeah, the product of listening is not observable. No? The process is not observable. You observe only the result of the meaningful input in the form of spoken or written output. No? You can see only the result of the input that you have given them, right? In the form of a written. For example, you ask them something, and then you tell them to respond something on paper, no? Right. But we don't really see the product. There's no product here. Okay, and yeah, if we go to the next line here, it says the productive skills of speaking and writing, no, allow us to, where is that? No?
To hear and see the process as it is performed.
Yes. So can you, Abby, please read this section? No? Is the after the table 6, we have one full paragraph, and then we have the next. No? The productive skills. Can you read this section, please?
Okay, from the product. Okay, the productive skills of speaking and writing allow us to hear and see the process as it is performed. Writing gives a permanent product in the form of a written piece, but unless you have recorded a speech, there is no permanent observable product for a speaking performance, because all those words you just heard have vanished from your perception, and you hope have been transformed into meaningful intake somewhere in your brain.
The next paragraph, please.
Okay. Okay. Receptive skills then are clearly the more enigmatic of the two modes of performance. You cannot observe the actual act of listening or reading, nor can you see or hear an actual product. You can observe learners only while they are listening or reading. The upshot is that all assessment of listening and reading must be made of the basis of observing the test takers speaking or writing, or not non-verbal responses, and not on the listening or reading itself. So all assessment of receptive performance must be made by inference.
By inference. By inference. So thank you very much. So this might be a little discouraging, no? Because many times you make these assumptions, no? That and you find yourself making inferences. You say, well, this is a good student, so usually he's going to do okay. This is not a really good student, and then maybe you give them a test. But how do you know that the results, or I mean the measurement that you obtain is a real indicator of the real competence that the student has? So that's what makes this process of assessing listening even more difficult. Well, so I'm going to ask you to read this. Finish reading this paragraph. Let's go to the next page, 119. If you can scroll down a little bit. The importance of listening.
The next page.
Yes,
Or
119.
Okay. Let me see. The importance of listening.
Great. So here, what you can see is what we discussed in the introduction. That listening is often implied as a component of speaking. And the question here is, how could you speak a language without also listening? So usually a person who speaks good English is because he should have also a good understanding of the language. Maybe not in the same level, because like I said, there are students who have incredible intonation, pronunciation, right? Okay, because because they have this skill. Maybe they practice. They are, when they had this. Maybe they're very analytical, and so they know that. But maybe they don't have the same percentage of ability in listening, because listening, as you could see, implies a lot of things. We're going to see, for example, all the indicators. We saw the basic types of performance, and it's a lot. It's a lot.
Prof, I have a question.
Yes.
I have heard that the listening skill is the last one you completely develop. I don't know if this is right or not, because you
Develop.
are able to speak, even though you speak or you use simple forms. You can read, but I don't know. You can develop that skill if you practice, but listening is more complex, and you have to. I don't know. There are many words that you cannot perceive sometimes.
Of course.
So I don't know if this is true. This is the last one we completely
We completely
develop.
develop. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yes, I would agree to a certain extent with this statement. Yeah, because especially for us as non-native speakers, because of our system of education, we are presented with a book first. When people want to learn English, the first thing is, okay, this is your book, and unless you started learning English as another language when you were a kid, because kids don't need books. They are the only ones that can fully understand everything. And in kids, is, for example, the statement is not true. Because kids have this, young children, I mean, no? Young children has this extraordinary ability to listen and then decode the sounds, and they understand the different sounds that English has. They know, they find these little differences, these contractions and everything. Something that we as adults can't do. The students, young children can do that. And so that's why they can learn a language with no accent, no? You, if you think about kids that live in France, in Germany, and when their parents have to travel, you find kids that speak 3 languages, and they speak all 3 languages as native speakers, no? And they are ready to learn another one and another one, because it's because they learn in the natural way, you know? Like they listen, and then they start making sense of things, and then they make their utterances, and as people correct them, as they use more the language, they make it better, no? But with adults, I would agree with you and with the statement, no?
Okay.
Because we are presented with I mean, when we decide to learn English, we are presented with a book, and so it's I mean, the system requires that you have perfect reading and writing skills in L1, no? In L1. And so if you are a good reader, and if you're very dedicated, you read a lot, you start with the grammar stuff. And of course, listening is maybe the last part, no? The last thing that I mean, or is maybe the one that we practice the least, no? And until, like you said, maybe until maybe later, no, when they say, well, you're gonna have to do this exam, this international exam, and that's when many students begin to do listening, no? So I guess you're right from the point of view academic and the system. Yeah, English is maybe the least worked, no, the least practiced, and also maybe the last one to be fully developed. Yes.
Thank you.
Great. And so, well, it's a shame, no, because languages should be learned in the natural way. It's much better, no? If, for example, if you travel with your parents when you're a teenager, and then you're exposed to the language, that's more natural, no? Because you listen to a lot of things, you listen to songs, you listen to your friends talking, and maybe you start also imitating more like the natural way. So, but I know that the system here is different. No? Great.
Complete.
So what you can see here in the importance of English is that what I said earlier at the beginning, that listening is often implied as a component of speaking. And I like this quote that says, to determine if someone is a proficient user of language, is right here. I think if you show me the cursor, you go up a few lines, no, up with your cursor. Yeah, if someone is, I mean, to determine if someone is a proficient user of a language, people usually ask, for example, do you speak Spanish? No, they never ask, do you understand Spanish? Do you understand and speak Spanish? So it's like speaking is usually relegated to second place, you know, and it shouldn't. It shouldn't, because kids work the language the other way around. No? They listen and listen and listen. Sometimes parents get anxious, you know, and say, "No, my kid doesn't understand the language. My kid will never. I mean, my kid won't say anything." No? But the student is what they are doing is processing all the input they get, and then one day they answer, and sometimes they answer like adults, no? Because they have all these hundreds and hundreds and thousands of words and phrases that they've heard, and then they magically make sense of all of them, and they put them in the right place to answer a question, ¿no? And it leaves you in awe, ¿no? Nos dejan así en fascinación, ¿no? Because you don't understand how it is that kids learn the language, no, without teachers. And here we are learning English with teachers, no? Okay, so input. Okay, well, I really encourage you to read all this section, because it's really interesting, no? And for example, this section that says even further impact, you know, additional impact is the likelihood that input in the oral and oral mode accounts for a large proportion of successful language acquisition. No? And it's true, no? The more exposure that people have for the language, no, the more, I mean, the more likelihood, no, más la probabilidad that the student is successful in acquiring the language, no? And it's true, no? And the book mentions oral and also oral, no? Oral meaning everything that is around, no? Signs, sign language, las cosas de alrededor. Right. Right, and maybe we can go to the last part here that says we therefore, you know, the next paragraph. If you can point here with the browser, with the cursor here, we therefore, yeah, maybe you can, if you want to, exactly, no? Okay, yeah. We therefore need to pay close attention to listening as a mode of performance or assessment in the classroom. So in this chapter, no, the author explains that they're going to see the basic principles and types of listening, and then move to a survey of tasks that can be used to assess listening. And he recommends that if you want to see more about issues in teaching listening, you read chapter 16. Yeah. Okay, and then we have yeah, if we can scroll down a little bit, basic types of listening. If we can scroll up a little bit, I mean, scroll down, exactly. Okay, so when we see the basic types of listening, first we have the 4 steps, the processes, no, that flash through our brain are these, no. I already read this for you, no? Recognizing the speech sounds, then determining what kind of a speech it is, then using your decoding methods, no, bottom up or top down, to make sense of what is being said. And earlier I forgot to mention number 4. Number 4 is on the next page, please. Next page. So number 4, where is that? Can we go to number 4? Exactly. In most cases, no, another process that flash through our brain is this, no? That in most cases, except when you're doing repetition tasks or exercises with the involvement of short-term memory, you know, so in most cases you delete the exact linguistic form in which the message was originally received in favor of conceptually retaining important or relevant information in long-term memory. So what the author is saying here is that in the process of listening, you know, they can ask you something, they can tell you something, or you can listen to something, right? But you don't need to answer in the same linguistic form. No? The only thing that you the only thing that you have to do is use from your all your repertoire of lexical, your lexical repertoire. Just retain the concept, okay, and understand this relevant information, and store it in your long-term memory. So that's also part of the process that happens. I mean, especially if you are exchanging, if